Hi, if you or your children are suffering because of your relationship with your ex-partner, because it's stressed or strained, or maybe they're just not a nice person, this show is for you. Welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook Olson and Charlie Jewett. Enjoy another episode now. Hey everybody, Charlie Jewett and Brook Olson here with the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast, episode 19. Oh, it's a good one, Brooke. Why don't the courts get it? Why doesn't the court you're working with get it? What is going on with the court system, Brooke? I cannot wait to hear your take on this because even from my very limited perspective, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how the courts make the decisions they make, why they make the decisions they make, or sometimes like, what are they thinking? But what do you want to say on this topic, or what have you learned over the years from seeing so many different cases?
Well, I think that it's funny, Charlie, because I don't think that they know what the heck that they're doing in terms of the decisions that they're making either. These are professionals. These are people that are supposed to understand. And, as a society, we look to our judicial system to really do the right thing. And, my honest belief is that they're trying to do exactly that in most cases, not in all cases. I mean, we've got places where people are doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, and they get caught up in their own distortions. They get caught up in their own belief systems. And, even within that conversation, to some degree, one could say that they're trying to do the right thing. But again, these are professionals. What the hell? Yeah. Come on. Let's see what's going on here. But I think some of the things that get in the way of them being able to really get it is traditional thinking. They've got traditional thinkings around parenting roles. They've got traditional thinking about what fathers do, what mothers do, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But, these are the things that don't link up because they don't understand the high conflict personalities. They don't understand what's going on there. But there's also another component that comes into that, and that is that there's a limited amount of the population within the professional areas that really do take time to understand this. And for the most part, the courts are really run by attorneys. I mean, these are professionals that are lawyers that have got training in the law. And there isn't a psychological component to it. Their brains don't work in that arena. When I sit down and I talk to an attorney about this stuff, they can take it in, but I can look in their eyes and there's a place where it doesn't connect. Yeah. Unless they've been in it, unless they've navigated it. And even then it doesn't connect. I can't tell you how many attorneys that I know that have been through divorces, and some of them through high conflict divorces. And they still don't get it because they haven't done the work that they needed to do to make that connection, to really understand, because they're stuck in this traditional thinking that how can somebody do that? That's normal. They should be able to do something else, and they can't get around this idea of, it's not normal.
Yeah. So there's some traditional thinking or some patterns from the past that still kind of haunt the court system or the way that judges think. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, both internally and externally. They've got their own distortions about what they think things should be, and that's the traditional piece. And then there's the distortions of their own lives that come into the conversation, that they're trying to do some internal correction that bends their thinking in the wrong direction as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does. Okay. So what's the how do they look at parental roles? Is it that the mom is this, the dad is this, and they're already kind of skewed, or what are you thinking there?
Right. I mean, there's traditional roles that we think of that even in today's progressive society that people are kind of stuck on. Dads are not the nurturing person in the family. They are more strict. They're more autocratic. They are the ones that are doing more of the work, and that the courts lean on them for more of the financial support sometimes, and or they have some distortion of that's what it should be, even if that's not what it's been. And for mothers that they are more nurturing, and on the flip side of the emotional piece that they can be more irrational and maybe in the more optimistic side of that, or the more healthy side of that conversation, they need to leave the kids with the mothers because they are the better parent, or they're the more nurturing parent. And they get at least initially skewed in some of these areas. You know, you and I have talked about, and you can certainly relate to this idea of, you know, I've been with this person for all these years, and there's been this abusive, unhealthy relationship that's gone back and forth, and my nerves are at an end, and I'm really angry, and that anger starts to bleed through. So now you're an angry person, and they look at that as you're angry, and they start to make decisions based on that rather than having an understanding, which they can't have. And they don't go to as the first possibility of, oh, this has been this long grind, and this person has got this affect because of what they have been in.
Right.
So, you know, these are the beliefs around gender and the beliefs around affect that come through, that the person that's untrained, the person that doesn't go, wait a minute, I want to step beyond this initial presentation and maybe see what's behind it, because, oh, I don't have time to get to this. I just have to deal with what's in front of me and make a quick movement, because I've got all of these other cases that I've got to get to, and they're equally as crazy as this one.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a serious lack of training. You mentioned that. I'll just ask you a question I've never asked you. You know, in all the years you've been doing this, how many judges or divorce attorneys have taken your full class?
0.
I thought you might say that. So, I mean, this is not like, I mean, the attorney's main focus is not high conflict relationships and psychology. It's the law, right?
Right.
And if they're a, you know, an attorney that's not on the up and up, it's how do we make this last as long as possible and bleed these families dry? And that's not every attorney. They're certainly out there.
Right.
Actually, I don't know if I ever told you this story. I actually had an attorney. One of my attorneys was very old and actually said out loud to me, because the attorney on the other side was also in his 70s or 80s. And he actually basically said out loud, if this were in our younger years, we'd make this last a lot longer and just find ways to keep it going. But we're both kind of tired, so we're going to try to settle this. I was like, I can't believe you just said that. I can't believe you said that. Like, while on the clock, while I'm paying you. But there's an element of that, right? I know another person whose divorce went on and on and on until like neither side had any money. And then the attorney was like, let's settle. You know?
Right.
Nothing left.
Right. Isn't that crazy? And oftentimes what attorneys do that are conscious of this or unconscious of this is they take these behaviors and they leverage them into creating a situation that puts the other person at a disadvantage, that they take these ideas and they drill them into the judge that says, listen, I mean, look at this behavior. I mean, this is what this man does, and they'll use that word man, or this is what this woman does, and they'll use that word woman as a leverage to these traditional thinkings that drive that thought back into, this isn't the way this should be. This should be a different way, and to leverage that conversation into getting more custody time for their client.
I think I'm not unique. I think there's probably plenty of people out there in, 2-3 year divorces where if they took all of the hundreds of pages of opposing documents against them, they could be summarized as, I would do things differently than you, or I don't like the way you parent, or something like that, right? It's just a big, giant complaint, or someone has a different opinion, but there's a attorney and a judge and exaggerations and all kinds of stuff that keeps it going on and on and on and on.
For sure, but here's the problem with stopping there is that sometimes this affect, sometimes this behavior that we're talking about is problematic, and it does need to be addressed. And there's something that has to take place either educationally or through psychological intervention or alcohol or substance abuse intervention or something there that is real. And people will take a affect and add that piece onto it that is not legitimate and create this big story or this big picture that there's a problem that isn't there, or that there isn't a problem there that needs to be addressed. So now I'm sitting on the bench and I'm trying to determine which is which. And I don't have the time, the background, or the education to make a good determination. So sometimes I'm just sitting there with a blindfold on and I'm throwing darts.
Yeah.
And when I miss the target, somebody gets hurt.
So for the 70% of divorces that sail through the system kind of smoothly, and they don't have the psychological component, they don't have the high conflict, all those disagreements, that he said, she said, imagine that those people are like, oh, the judge nailed it. You know what I mean? They found out our accurate incomes. They put it into the software and said what it said on the screen. And like when it's law-based, it's probably quite easy for the judges, even in the 20 minutes they have with you or whatever it is, right? But when you get into psychology, he said, she said, and I wasn't there to see either one of them, right?
Right.
That's got to be a different world.
It is. It is. And then, again, with that same conversations, some attorneys know that this stuff is in the background and they know the words to say and the way to paint a picture, and they will tell their clients to go out and do X, Y, and Z to fill that picture in. And then the judge sees that picture because it got painted because the other party was unaware of what was happening to them and they fell into that trap, right?
Yeah, here's what's weird about the dynamic that I've seen in the court cases that I'm familiar with is and it's almost like this in the world of crime too. The criminals have such an advantage because they can kind of make up anything they want to. They know what the police are doing and what current techniques they have, so they think, what else is there, right? Mm-hmm. And then the cops have to catch up, right? And they're always on the defense, as you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? So no matter what, the side that's making false allegations and exaggerating and doing that kind of stuff, even when it turns out not to be true, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Somehow it's like when in the courtroom on TV shows and movies, when somebody says something, they know there's going to be an objection, but the jury already heard it, right? Mm-hmm. And the judge is like, withdraw that from the record, but it's already in their heads, right? So there's this weird thing about that. Like, I'm not willing to lie. I'm not willing to make false allegations and use false numbers and things like that. So I'm never doing that in court. But if somebody on the other side does some of that stuff and then it turns out not to be true, somehow, like what you're saying, like there's a picture that started to be painted in the judge's mind or whatever, right? There's a strange thing like that. They seem to have an advantage. The side that doesn't mind doing those things seems to have an advantage.
So let's talk about why that creates an advantage. And let's look at that from a healthy standpoint for a minute. Although it's not a particularly healthy piece that's taking place, what the judges are looking at is this information is coming in. And if this information is true and I don't do something about this, then somebody is going to get hurt, right? Because the accusations that are being put out there are such that put the children into jeopardy if they're true, right? Mm-hmm. So they're erring on the side of caution, which is kind of maybe a healthy thing to do. But because of the lack of the other things that we're talking about, because of the lack of their education to what these pieces are, they're making decisions that aren't accurate or good decisions in the long run. So we go back to when these things do happen, that what the solution to it is, as the parent tries to, as we've discussed in an earlier podcast, that they dig out from it just by simply continuing to do the right thing and let their actions show what is really true here, whether it is having to go back to supervised visitations or then maybe, non-supervised visitations and then doing educational programs or whatever it is that the judges are asking them to do. Oftentimes what the judges are doing in this is saying, listen, I have to make this decision based on the information that I have, accurate or not. But to you, person that I'm asking you to do these things for, what you do from here is going to tell me what I need to do to move forward. Right. And if you do these things and I find out that something else is going on over here, then something's going to flip. And I've seen this happen enough that I think, my true belief is that these professionals, these judges, the courts are giving it their best shot.
Yeah. I mean, we have to think that to stay sane, right? And if we were in their shoes, we'd certainly be giving it our best shot. Having said that, I mean, there almost should be two court systems, high conflict and normal, right? One's sort of run more by psychiatrists or whatever, psychologists, and the other run by legal professionals, or they have a different training track with a different, it's almost like, what major did you have in college? Well,
okay, you became a judge with which major? You know what I mean?
Right.
Law first, psychology second, or psychology first? Because the current setup doesn't go very well for the alienated parent, or for the parent that's on the receiving side, the target.
Right. And we're back to that conversation of lack of training. A lot of these judges that really want to, interestingly enough, there are some judges that like to do family law. They want to be in there. They want to make a difference. They've made it, their primary piece. And what that does when they do that is it restricts their upward mobility as a judge, but this is a place where they really want to make a difference in the world. And many of these judges that do this, or senior judges that want to disseminate some more information down to the people that are underneath them, do take more training. The AFCC has conferences that are dedicated to this portion of family law, the high conflict arena. And they'll go in and they'll do these trainings. And these trainings in and of themselves have a tendency to be inadequate within the conference arena. They'll go in and they'll take a 2-hour or 3-hour workshop at a conference and try to get more information about it. But it's not the in-depth understanding of the psychology of what's going on. And even within that, many psychologists, I've had them in my trainings, and I start to talk about personality disorders in this arena, or personality types in this arena, that how they express, what the affect is, and how they show up. And these are people sometimes with PhDs that go, you're kidding me, because that's not the focus unless you make it the focus. And it's not an understanding, even if you make it the focus, unless you've got some level of clinical experience in it. So you see it and you go, oh, that's what that is. And sometimes when people have that focus, it's because they come from that arena. They've had that in their world. And to undo the distortions of their own projection into that become problematic. So you see this picture that I'm painting here? Yeah, it's difficult because it is so out there. It is so upside down.
It's frustrating.
Right. To say the very least. Say the very least.
So that's a lot stacked against you if you are in one of these battles. Right. And so, and the chances that, well, here's another thing, why do the courts not get it? But also it's hard to find an attorney to represent you on your side that fully gets it too.
Mm-hmm.
Because that'd be different if the judge just was what they were, but there were attorneys that fully understood it and knew how to talk to the judges, at least for one case. But that's not even that easy to find either.
Right. And even if you found it, an attorney is talking to somebody that doesn't understand it. And how do you make that person understand it if they don't understand it?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have those pieces. So again, a psychologist thinks different than an attorney. It's a different set of explorations. An attorney is supposed to be sitting there going, law, this is what's been done. This is how we do this. This is how we take this on. And a psychologist is more about, well, what's the cause, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a different run at it. So to blend the two is very difficult. And there's very few people out there that can actually navigate both of those roads. But as a parent that's in this, if I have an understanding of this and I've got an attorney that can listen to my understanding of this and then take that and disseminate that in a way for the delivery to the judge, then we're making some progress. And I think within the training of the judges, the attorneys, and the client, if we can be in an arena of creating structures to move things forward rather than to stall things, so we can have an opportunity to have all of the parties step into the process, whether they want to or not, begins to create a movement forward. So as a parent, what I want to be able to do is go in and say, listen, this is what they're saying, and I know that we're going to get behind the 8 ball here because this happened, and this happened.
Yeah.
But what I want to be able to do is out the get-go say, this is how I want to approach this. I don't need the pie all at once necessarily, because this happened and I know I've got to navigate this. So let's set the structure up so we can create an end game that everybody can see as being not necessarily healthy in the big picture, but that I'm healthy, that I'm able to do what I say that I can do as a parent. And let's take this other stuff and, don't listen to me, let me show you.
You know how in the TV and movies, when there's a court scene, they call people to the stand and who's your next witness and all that jazz, right?
Right.
I've never seen anything like that in divorce court, but is there something that exists like that? Like, do you show up in court and share your expertise? Is there a reality like that anywhere?
Well, there is a reality where some people do that. There is a reality where they will call in professional witnesses to talk about behavior and what it looks like. And, they do this oftentimes in alienation cases where they can bring in alienation experts and they can talk about what alienation looks like and what the behaviors are and what the affects are.
Yeah.
And, they can say then, if this, then that. And oftentimes that can have some impact on the outcome of those kinds of cases. There are doctors, there are people that really do understand this stuff and are able to help judges attune to that.
We interviewed
Right.
Dr. Bone, and I would imagine him sitting in a courtroom speaking in front of a judge. That kind of person would be pretty helpful.
For sure. He's one of those people.
Nice. Okay. So we have the lack of training problem, right? There's a time issue. I don't think you spoke much about it here, but in the class you talked about that the average judge in San Diego has like 5,000 or 10,000 cases, and they're spending 20 minutes, right, on average in court deciding what happens on every given session, right?
Right. If I have this information, if the judge has this information, how does he or she disseminate it? How do they make sense out of it? Because we've got two opposing conversations and very little factual information to go along with it. So the factual information may be, oh, she had a DUI. She's not a good parent. And that DUI is 5 years ago. And they didn't talk about the recovery. So the judge talks about, they go back in and they look and they say, well, you didn't address anything about that accusation. This is in my head. I'm going to err on the side of supervised visitation, or I'm going to err on the side of you have to go to AA meetings, or whatever the restriction that gets put in there. I'm going to err on the side of I want you to put a device on your car that won't allow you to start the car unless you blow into it and it's sober for so long.
Right.
I mean, these are the types of things that they have to make snap decisions on because they don't have. Think about this. I mean, my first time in court, I'm there for 10 minutes and they send me to Family Court Services, and then they get the report from Family Court Services and they look at that and they go, well, now I got 20 minutes and I can argue for or against that piece, and I'm going to make those determinations based on that 2 hours that this person had, that they don't have the information to be able to really put that piece forward, and they're shooting from the hip. They're doing the best that they can.
I was going to say something about that because I was in Family Court Services one time and I said, well, have you guys reviewed everything? And they said, well, we only review about the first 10 pages. And I'm thinking the last thing I received from the other side was 365 pages. And then we get a different person.
Right.
So someone interviewed us a year before, and then a new person comes in, and then I'm going to use the word lazy in the non-judgmental form. Like all of our brains are looking for shortcuts. You know what I mean? That's why we make assumptions and rule certain things out and only focus on certain things. But if you're talking about a completely overwhelmed judge with more cases than they can imagine and has 20 minutes to work with you, and there's 6 other couples sitting there in the courtroom at the same time just for the afternoon session, right? And they see this Family Court Services report, and I know certain judges are different, but I've heard the words, this judge basically always goes with FCS, right? There's going to be some reality that people find shortcuts when they're overwhelmed. And one of those shortcuts could be depending on whatever it's called in other states, I don't know, but depending on Family Court Services, but then Family Court Services didn't review the documentation.
Right, because they didn't have the time to do it, because they had 4 people lined up and there's just so much because they have to write reports, they have to do these things, and they're understaffed. And it's not that I'm making excuses for the system, but these are absolute truths. So when we see this stuff go south, we go back to, when is this going to end? Because nobody's seeing what we're going through, and how do I get to the end of this at some point? So part of this conversation today is trying to help our listeners, Charlie, stop getting into blame and how we get here. But again, the end game, how do we stay in the process of, this is where I'm at, and how do I keep from screwing this up worse by doing something stupid, but listening to what this person is asking me to do so I can change their perception. Because this is all about perception, right?
Yeah, it feels like a giant game of perception management.
Exactly. And here's the good news in the perception management is, even if I am behind the curve, that if I stay resolute in my movement toward being a good parent by not getting another DUI, or not getting a DUI, or not having an anger outburst in a place where I get arrested, or there's some record of something of my misbehavior, if I avoid all of that and I take the classes that somebody's asking me to do and I go through the hoops that they're asking me to do, I show up in front of this person as something different than I am being portrayed as.
Mm-hmm.
And that's perception management. But on top of that, it's also evolutionary to me, because I'm doing things differently than I have ever done before. I'm changing who I am in a positive moment.
Yep.
And that's where this starts to turn over and become different.
It's stressful for me even to talk about it. It's just I mean, I don't know. This is totally off topic. This is not in our outline at all, but I'm curious if anybody's done any research on how this messy, painful, costly system of getting unmarried has affected people's views of marriage, particularly men. I'm a man, so that's just what I'm thinking. I mean, it's so hard to get out of one of these, right? Relationships that aren't working, and so costly that I can't be the first person to think, why do we even get married anymore? Let me just live together and function like married people. Like what besides tax advantages, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying. It's like, oh, if the relationship doesn't work out, I'm going to go back into this nightmare system that's overwhelmed and can't handle it, and it lasts as long as it lasts,
Right.
Marriage is taking a hit in some way from the difficulties in the divorce world, I'm sure.
Without a doubt. And, statistically, we know that is a deteriorating component, because 50% of all marriages fail, and 60% of second marriages fail. And, that number has a tendency to go up, or, with the marriages that you have, basically because I think people don't learn the lessons that they need to learn in the process. And the lesson to me is not to get married. The lesson is to learn what went wrong, so if you do it again, you don't make the same mistake.
Man, with all that divorce, you'd think we'd be experts at it instead of struggling, right? If half of every marriage ends in divorce, you'd think divorce would be like a strength of our country,
Well, I've been divorced twice.
Me too, almost.
And yeah, well, almost.
Jeez.
But both of those divorces changed who I am, not in a negative way. It just, I was able to go back and look at myself and go, well, hell, I did that. This wasn't all the other person. Yeah, they had this going on, but I played into it and I had my own stuff in it. So as I clean those up, my relationships get better as I go.
Yeah. I'm in the best relationship of my life because of looking back at the ways that I picked my partner the 2 times and saying I wasn't even being honest about who they were at the moment that I was marrying them. I had this vision of like, who are we going to become together? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. One of them very, very much affected by religious beliefs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If we're both going to become more like Jesus, what can go wrong?
Right.
It's like, who cares where we start from, right? And then somehow I end up marrying somebody that is completely opposite me in all the things the ways that I like to live, right? And it's
spiritual bypass.
That doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And yeah, so I mean, I'm in the greatest relationship of my life because when I went to write my dating profile and decide what I was looking for, I was like, this is exactly who I am. And I don't want the opposites attract and then destroy each other's lives. I kind of want to be a little bit more similar to enjoy the
Right.
same things and to journey together, right? And so I was very upfront about that. And that's some advice I would give to anybody listening is like, don't find people or pick people the way you used to. Don't repeat it. You know what I mean? Like take some work on yourself. Obviously, I mean, I waited 2 years, 2.5 years, so I didn't jump right into it, but something's got to be like you're saying you need to learn from these marriages. And in that sense, they can be incredible assets in our life.
Right. But also to be able to take the components of where your beliefs about who you thought you were and explore where your own distortion in that is. Because we've all got that piece of idealized self-image that is just it's a facade, and to be able to break through that becomes an important part of that change too, because who we think we are is not always who we are.
Wait, I'm not perfect? And you know me. Just messing with you.
Yeah.
We have to be humble, right? Humility is a beautiful quality.
Right.
To be able to see where you're weak or wrong or things like, and just change, right?
Right.
Become better. Like change your mind if you're wrong. You know, change your habits if they're unhealthy. You can change your entire brain. We've talked about it. You
Right.
change the wiring of your brain, the physicality of it. So we're so like natural and conversational this time. I don't even know where we're at on the outline. What's next as far as points that we want to make sure we make on this episode about the courts?
Well, we were talking about the lack of training, and I just want to hit these couple of things real quick because we're talking about really the distortions in personality types that come into here and what the people miss about not doing it. So they don't have the time to assess the behaviors if they do understand personality disorders, even if they do get it. They have the lack of information regarding the relationship. They have the lack of discernment between secure attached relationships versus meshed relationships with children. So sometimes they give too much too early, or they don't give enough early enough. So whatever it is, wherever you find yourself in this process, what we want to be able to do is, if you're in it, you're in it. And there's just grinding through and finding your way out, getting good help, getting good information, and doing the right thing continually. If you're not in it yet, if you're hearing this conversation and you're just getting started, understand the steps to go through so you don't step on the landmines that distort the ability for these people that you're going to be dealing with, that are going to be making decisions for you, so you don't give them something to grab a hold of negatively and to move that piece forward. I had a potential client just yesterday call me on the phone, and they said, I'm just breaking up. I'm just getting started with this process. And this is this person's behavior. I understand what narcissism is. I understand what this looks like. And I don't know what to do. They're a good parent, and we're just starting to share 50%. And I said, 50% is a great place to start, but you just said something to me that was totally opposite of the other statement. And that, they're a good parent, and yet they're acting like this and this and this. So there's a distortion in here that you have to get your head around in order to move forward, so you don't make the mistakes that are going to come your way. Because if they are who you say they are, this is what they're going to do, and you're going to be at the short end of the stick unless you get moving forward.
Yeah.
So those are the pieces that I think are along the last things that I want to talk about here. So in conclusion to this whole conversation that we're having, what do I do? Patience, perseverance, continue to educate yourself, do the right thing always. Don't fall into the trap of getting into the negative, I'm going to get you stuff. And again, at the end of every one of these, we come back to just be a great parent.
It is the one standard, right? The foundation of the entire thing is like, be a great parent, no matter what the other person is saying.
Yes.
And then create a track record of things for the judge and the courts to see, so that they, knowing that they're overwhelmed and need shortcuts, give them the shortcut of nothing this other person says is ever corroborated anywhere. There are no DUIs. There are no CPS calls. There are no, you know what I mean? Just they can mouth off all they want to. And eventually, if the evidence points the other direction, I would think even these overwhelmed judges have to go, I'm just not seeing evidence of this, 50-50 buy or whatever, you know?
Right.
They want to get these off their plate. I mean, I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard when they get to about 2.5, 3 years old, the judges are like, this is too much. We need to get this out of here. It's been too long, right?
Right.
And so there is, it's way longer than I'd ever hoped, but there is some hope for people that are hitting that, 2.5 year mark or whatever, that whether it makes sense or not, there's some sort of a deadline in the judge's mind that we should have it done by 3 years, right?
At the worst.
Yeah. Well, a difficult topic, honestly, for me to hear about or talk about and hold back my tongue on things I'd really like to say. But I appreciate your input, as always, and your expertise. The court system, what we need for people is to understand, so they don't go through what I went through, that the court system doesn't get it. So you don't have your expectations. And I wish the very first conversation with my very first attorney was, listen, no matter if someone's telling the truth or not, these judges are going to err on the side of caution. So here's what to expect, right? And that would have created some sanity in me that I didn't have for a while. And hopefully the people that are listening can have a little bit more accurate expectations of what to expect in court, right? And really, if you have any actual negative things, mistakes you've made in the past, right? DUIs or CPS calls for abuse or any of that kind of stuff, just expect those to be leveraged to the hilt, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and also get out in front and do repair with them, do the things that somebody wants to see somebody doing if they have those.
Yeah, shouldn't a good attorney be able to, like, if you asked an attorney, other people that have had this and done nothing, what have the judges told them to then go do, like join AA or whatever you're mentioning, right? And why not jump in front of it and do those things, 2 months before the court date or whatever?
Right. Get ahead of the curve. Know what's coming, fix it.
All right. That's probably a good place to stop, huh?
Yep.
All right, guys, we care about you. Keep calling in, getting in touch with Brooke for some help or join the classes, so what you can do from the comfort of your own home. This has been episode 19. Why doesn't the court get it? Can be really super frustrating, but there is a way to manage that and at least understand why things are the way they are and to work within that reality, whether we like it or not. We'll see you guys next week. Charlie Jewett and Brooke Olson signing off. Brooke, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle. Great. And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website are also really good places to get the material. And also we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brooke has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is Brooke at highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Charlie.